A few months ago, I had one of the scariest experiences I've had so far in my life. I tried a drug that I never had before, and it affected me in ways I wouldn't have imagined. Growing up, I'm sure a lot of you guys like me, we've had our teachers tell us perhaps in school, or our parents or other family members that drugs are bad, or at the very least, you should be careful. And a lot of us, I feel like, brush this off, or at the time it sounds dandy and fine, but inevitably for many of us, as we get older, we get curious, or maybe we have friends that have said good things about drugs, or we get peer pressure to try them, or we're just curious to test it out for ourselves when we're in our late teens or 20s, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching this video. And I tried a psychedelic before with one of my good guy friends. I had a very low dose of shrooms, and everything ended up being fine. So I think having that positive experience made me more likely to, going forward, try out different things. In April, I had been talking to this girl for a couple weeks now. We've, at this point, gotten to know each other pretty well in such a short time and trust each other. And that's when she brought up trying an edible. Now, she's a bit younger than I am, but she still tried it before with her friends, and she's had good experiences thus far. So I figured now was as good of a time as any to test it out. Going into it, most of the things I've heard about it is it makes you more carefree. A lot of people, it takes away their anxiety. It makes you laugh at things you normally wouldn't laugh at. And of course, it makes you hungry. So before we ended up having one together, I made sure to get some snacks, of course. I remember I got Oreos and chips, and I expected that it would be pretty fun. So I picked her up as I normally do. I felt fairly normal that evening, and when we both got back to my place, I was still feeling pretty normal for the most part. And then we had the edible, and probably the dumbest mistake I ended up making was this. Well, perhaps both of us, but primarily me, because I was the one trying the edible for the first time. I was thinking it would be a good idea to watch a horror movie because, well, my thought process was if edibles put you in a weird mood and it makes you more carefree or laugh at things, I thought it would be less stressful and actually kind of enjoyable to watch a horror movie, right? It would kind of make sense, but perhaps for people that are more knowledgeable about edibles, they would know for new users it's probably not the greatest idea. Everything was fine about halfway through the movie so far. Everything was completely normal overall. But then we paused it and we did other things for a little bit. And before we resumed the movie, that is when things went downhill even more. Because I made the mistake of what a lot of people do who are new users to edibles. I brought up, hey, maybe we should have another edible because I wasn't feeling the effects of it very much. I was still feeling very normal, as she was too for the most part. So she asked if I was sure, and I said I was, and that's when we had a second edible. Now, when we resumed the horror movie, that's when things started to change really quickly. And I would like to think that the effects of the second edible weren't even kicking in. It was actually the effects of the first edible most likely finally, well, kicking in because it takes some time. It usually takes an hour or two. It affects everyone differently, but generally it's going to take a good bit of time. My anxiety started to go through the roof, and at this point, the movie was pretty much done, but I was super anxious at this point. I was even terrified, and a big part of it was because the movie itself was very scary, but I thought that if we watched a movie that was more fun after, it would help calm me down. At this point, I had already eaten a ton of the chips. It certainly did, even though I was at the point I was terrified, I still was hungry at this point, but that quickly went away. I wasn't hungry for very much longer, and she could tell that I was definitely feeling off. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself. I didn't want her to know that I was starting to feel terrified and very anxious and I was having a bad experience. I was trying to keep it all inside, but she could tell I was already starting to shake. So that's when we decided to watch a more just fun movie that would be more relaxing, or so I thought it would be. We watched a kids movie afterwards. I don't want to say exactly what it is because there's certain things that might end up triggering me again if I'm not careful, but we went from seeing a horror movie to a kids movie. I thought it would calm me down. Not the case whatsoever. What happened is once we got into the movie, I was still somehow anxious the whole time. I was so focused on everything too. Everything seemed like it was in slow motion. It was the strangest thing. The end of the horror movie and basically the entirety of this movie felt like it was several hours. Time feels like it's going in slow motion when you're taking a psychedelic like shrooms or edibles. At least that's my experience. It might be different for everyone. Things feel like they're in slow motion. And then it got to a point, the thing that absolutely terrified me and gave me so much paranoia is at a certain part in the movie, one of the characters, when it was one of the woman characters in the cartoon movie, when she was talking, I felt like I was getting hypnotized. And it was one of the girls I had something going on with prior. Someone I wasn't in a relationship with, but someone I was basically talking to, dating, you could say in a situationship. I essentially heard her voice, and it was almost as if she was talking to me, the character in the movie. It got to the point where things were so bad that because of the way I was thinking and feeling, it got to the point where I thought the girl I was with who was sitting right next to me, that her and the person I knew from the past were plotting essentially to kill me. Yep, that's how serious it got. It was absolutely terrifying. I was keeping all these thoughts inside. The girl that was there with me, I was not letting her know any of this, and I was starting to spiral. My thoughts were going completely out of control. I knew I had to step away from the movie. It was getting very, very bad. I was shaking a lot, and eventually though, and I'm kind of glad this happened because I didn't want her to feel bad or something or get the sense that I was really struggling. Maybe it would have actually been better if she knew. I don't know, because it can be terrifying to deal with on your own. But she eventually fell asleep or was laying down, and I was just watching the time go by. I was just watching the time go by. It was in slow motion. It was going really slowly. At this point, it had been probably 3 or 4 hours after I had had the first edible, and there was no sign of things getting better anytime soon. The thoughts were still running in my head. I was thinking of a lot of different patterns and thoughts, thinking that my life was in danger, that they were going to kill me. And you can imagine how hard it is to keep your composure together when you think someone right next to you at the time with your current state of mind, you think that they're going to kill you potentially or harm you in any shape or form, which is obviously completely not true once you feel back to normal, but you don't realize that at the time. What I likely went through is called edible induced psychosis. For those of you guys that don't know what psychosis is, it basically is an altered state of mind that is different from your own. You have thoughts, feelings, hallucinations, as in you might see or hear things that aren't actually there. It's very common for people that have bipolar or schizophrenia. It's very likely to have psychosis as one of your symptoms, but it can also be caused by drugs, especially psychedelics, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to make this video, so you guys are aware of one of the potential risks. My anxiety was really bad for even a few days after that. For the first time in my life, I had to be prescribed anxiety medication, a very low dosage of it, and I only took it for a few times. I don't take it anymore. It was a short time thing. I want to make that clear. But I literally wasn't able to sleep because I had so much paranoia for a few days. I literally thought there were things on my car, stuff going on with my phone. I thought that those two people were out to get me, and it was very, very bad. It was a scary experience. I felt like I wanted to face my fears now that it's been a few months and make this video to hopefully help other people so you feel like you're not alone, and to understand the risks of trying drugs for the first time because you don't know what you're going to get into. Even though most people might have good experiences, you never know what is going to happen. Since then, I've calmed down. It was a very bad day. It was potentially the worst day of my life. It was so scary, And I was finally, after a few days, taking that anxiety medication short term was able to help a little bit. I was able to get back on track with sleeping and living my life normally like I was able to. As for the girl, we hung out a few times after that, so everything was okay. It wasn't completely the end of it or a complete disaster in that way, and we're still on good terms. And I still, even to this day, I didn't tell her everything that happened because I didn't want her to feel bad. It wasn't at all her fault. At the end of the day, my fault and responsibility, because you never know what you're getting into when you try a drug. And regardless of who you're with, you need to be very, very careful because you don't know how it might affect you. If you guys benefited from this video, be sure to give it a like and share it to a friend or family member that might be able to relate to it. And let me know in the comments below if you guys want to continue seeing these types of videos if they help you.